Okay.
Bok.
Pozdrav svima. Okay.
Bok Mirta, ja sam Vedran. Upravo sam se javio mailom. Ksenija, you are muted.
Ovo, isto. Okay. Hi everyone, can you check screen sharing and presentations before we start?
Evo moje pitanje, je li se vidi kao puni ekran ili vi vidite sve?
Ne, vidimo.
Morate pokrenuti ovaj slideshow jedino. Ali se vidi samo.
Radi
super.
sada.
Da.
Hoćemo li sad drugi tako?
Da.
Evo, mogu ja. Vedrano, ćeš ti se odšerat.
Hoću.
Ili možete samo share pa će on preuzeti.
Aha, sad se izbaci.
Izgubiti sharing, jel da?
Dobro.
Jel me čujete?
Da.
Čujemo.
Super, hvala.
Evo, to sam ja. Se vidi?
Da, vidi se.
Dobro, odlično. Evo ja se stopam.
Ok, samo da vidim.
Ana, pa imaš više sjedih nego ja u bradi.
A stara žena, šta ćeš?
Stara žena.
Samo
Finili su, recite.
Ksenija, možete nešto reći da vidimo mikrofon. Radi vam, ne radi?
Ne čujemo.
Ne čujemo vas. Jel odmutali ste se, to je sve ok, ali...
Kad je Ksenija na Havajima.
Da, od vjetra ne čuje, da.
Vetrane, ne vidiš moju novu sobu? Preselili smo se.
Wow.
Da.
Ja upravo pospremam svoju sad kad vidim da mi se vidi.
Ja isto vidim tamo kutije koje su mi ostale od...
Welcome to my home office.
Čuj, a šta ćete vi iz potresa?
Ja ću ovdje biti još godinama, ja ne znam, nemaju planove za obnoviti moje.
Lijepo donesi leš tu, pa onda gotovo.
Imam kadu.
Imaš kadu?
Samo ne, Ksenija se ne čuje.
A ne čujemo te Ksenije. Ali prezentaciju vidimo, ali ne znam šta je.
Prezentacija se vidi, da, ali samo šta je ovo?
Nije mutana.
Nije mutana, ona je samo trenutno.
A da staviš, Ksenija stavi slušalice, mislim da je to najbolje tako radi kad se stave slušalice. Ili se izbaci pa se ponovo vrati.
Da, može biti, Ksenija, da je uključen mikrofon od laptopa, pa onda ne znam preko čega se zapravo spajaš, da... Da to pokrenem kad bude...
Jel me čujete?
Da.
Čujemo.
Odlično.
Jeste svi testirali vaše prezentacije? Vidjela sam dvije.
Jesmo. Ne, bila je i Ksenija isto.
Je, super, dobro.
Je, sve je okej.
Koliko sam razumjela, ova prethodna sesija je trajala malo duže. I sad ne znam, hoće nam neko od Saruđara reći kad krećemo, s obzirom da očito krećemo malo sa zakašnjenjem.
Ja bi da mi krenemo na vrijeme, pa ne moraju ljudi, trebaju samo otići po kavu u svoju kuhinju. Ili negdje.
Ja svoju imam.
Ja ne pijem kavu.
Da. A ja sam izišla sa jednog ovog projektnog sastanka da budem tu, pa se moram vratiti poslije.
A bit ćete tu za Q&A?
Sat vremena ću biti.
Dobro.
Tako.
Do 1,5.
I 15, da, 1,5, ajde, dobro, 1,5. Tako.
Ja bi se nadao da
Do
će
1,5
Q&A
bi
biti u
trebalo jer
sklopu predavanja.
a
Da.
sad vidit ćemo duže.
A ba ja ne bi duže, ako
Ja isto ne
može.
bih duže.
Da.
A vidit ćemo ako krenemo na vrijeme.
Pa ja bi krenula.
Ne može, traje koliko je napisano i nema dulje.
Tako je. Mi ćemo se
Trebaju znati
držati.
s kim imaju posla.
Tako, mi ćemo se držati.
Medical ne dozvoljava van rasporeda.
Tako je.
Mi ćemo započeti na vrijeme, a oni kad se uključe.
Je, ali kad će oni nas uključiti?
A pa da. Kaže, webinar is now streaming live on YouTube.
Najbolje da Ana počne govoriti o research integrity tu za nas 5, 6, da ponovimo.
Pozdrav svima, isprika. Znači ovako, svi ste isprobali ove prezentacije i to sve radi, jel?
Radi.
Ako ste spremni, pa započeli bi sa webinarom.
Može.
Excellent.
Može. Evo, ide live, pa sačekajte ono tipa 5 sekundi.
Samo sekundu.
Samo sekund.
Evo ga, dobro je.
Mirta?
Reci.
Alen je,
Bog.
Daj molim te samo, ne znam jesi vidjela mail.
Za sponzore vidjela sam, znači samo da najavim sponzore.
Samo reci da se ne moraju odmah spajati, da ima par poruka naših sponzora, moramo ih pustiti. Ne?
Dobro. Stay tuned.
I sad kreće live, evo. Ajde.
Jesmo live? Hello everyone, and welcome back to the 12:30 session of PubMet 2020 conference. This session is hosted by the University of Split Faculty of Medicine and the University of Split Library. My name is Mirta Matošić, and I will be the moderator for this session. Before I introduce this session's topic and the speakers, just a brief note that the Q&A will be after the 3 presentations that we have prepared, and that all participants are invited to post their questions in the chat box on the side. If your question is for a particular presenter, please indicate who is it for. Also, after the presentations, we'll have a few messages from our sponsors, so stay connected. I will remind you of that at the end of the last session. So this panel will include a brief presentation of how different publications deal with misconduct and how they ensure the integrity of the published record. This session will be based on actual cases from real life, as our presenters will show you in their speeches. Our speakers are Professors Ana Marušić, Ksenija Baždarić, and Vedran Katavić, and I will introduce each before their presentations. The first presentation will be by Professor Ana Marušić. So I will ask the other 2 presenters to mute themselves now. And Professor Ana Marušić almost doesn't need an introduction. She's been either a presenter or a co-author or on the programming committee on almost all, if not all, PubMets so far. But still, I will say a few words, and so Professor Marušić is a professor of anatomy and chair of the Department of Research in Biomedicine and Health at the University of Split School of Medicine. She has been the editor-in-chief of the Croatian Medical Journal for 20 years and is now the founder and co-editor-in-chief of the Journal of Global Health. I'm reading this, sorry, I can't memorize it all. She's currently the vice president of the European Association of Science Editors, and her biomedical research is focused on the interactions between the immune and bone systems. However, she's here before her research interests also include peer review and research integrity. Her today's presentation will be on publication integrity. She will describe how editors ensure the integrity of the published record and will present some tools and best practices. So, Professor Matošić, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I'm sharing my screen and I hope that you see my screen now and my presentation. Thank you again. I'm really glad that I'm again at a PubMed conference. I think it's a very important conference for different stakeholders to exchange their experiences. And today I'm going to talk about publication integrity. I will not present any cases, but I will kind of present the basic requirements for journals to be able to deal with different aspects of publication integrity and research integrity in general. And I will be happy to join Vedran and Ksenija in the cases they are going to explain. I just want to kind of start with a basic definitions. Very often people ask, so what's the difference between research ethics and what is research integrity? So what's the difference? Is there a difference? And actually there is a lot of talk about it now, especially in Europe, and there are some Horizon 2020 projects that have looked deep into this, and this is what they came. This is a recent conclusion and document from one of these projects, the project that is called an NRI. And as you see here, research ethics is actually what we do when we do research. It's the application of ethics principles and values to different issues like research with humans, research with animals, data protection, and so on and so on. It also addresses scientific misconduct too. And research integrity is something that is more internal. It's the values, attitudes, and habits of researchers to conduct research accordingly to the frameworks, guidelines, obligations, standards, professional, general, and also having the internal values and virtues of performing responsible conduct of research. And publishing integrity is a part of research integrity, because research integrity is not actual experiments, doing experiments well, but also in planning research, in addition to conducting research, but also in reporting and reviewing research, whether it is authorship and publication or peer review. And speaking as a journal editor, all of these issues come back to the journal editor, because many cases are not only about what is published and how it was peer reviewed, but how the research was done. And then journal editors get together with different stakeholders from the authors, institutions, funding agency to discuss cases and to resolve research integrity cases. And I just want to emphasize what it meant for journal and how this was actually developed. And a very good example is the ICMJE. I come from a biomedical field, and this is something that we know most about, all the three speakers. So this body, International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, was created to help with the standards for publishing. And actually it's very interesting how they moved from requirements for how to structure a manuscript to be submitted to different journals with the same style and same reference style, to actually talking more about ethical issues in publishing. So from the time when it was created in 1979, where it was all about how to structure a manuscript, what to write where, how to write references. Now, when you look at what these requirements tell us, it's mostly about what the roles or responsibilities are of different stakeholders in the publishing process, and then a lot about publishing and editorial issues, and very little bit at the end is about manuscript preparation and submission. And what we talk about are all these topics that you see under the roles of responsibilities, authors, disclosures of competing interests, peer review process, journal owners, editorial freedom, protection of research participants, and then how to deal with the published record and how to protect its integrity, what to do in allegations of scientific misconduct, how to observe copyright, overlapping publications, fees, supplements, electronic publishing, journals and the media, clinical trial registration. So there are so many things that are added now to the actual research that are very important to ensure the integrity and transparency of the published record in research. And now I'm going to go through a basic requirements for a journal so that a journal can say that they have full integrity in what they do in publishing research. And I'm going to go very briefly through a audit tool from the Committee of Publication Ethics. It's a checklist for the practices of individual journals. It's available only to the members, and as you can see here, Committee on Publication Ethics is now the body that is one of the main bodies for promoting publishing integrity. It has more than 12,000 members, and one of their product and help for editors is this journal audit. It's available to members, as I said. It's a checklist where you can look into your journal and see whether you have satisfied all different aspects of publishing integrity and research integrity in general. And I'm just going to go through these 10 different items just to provide a kind of a platform and basis for the cases that we're going to discuss later. So in allegations of misconduct, journals have to be clear about what procedures they have for handling allegations, and usually they come first to the journal because what is published in the journal is the best documentation of someone's research project apart from laboratory books and records. Journals have to take this seriously, and policies that are published on a journal site should include how these allegations are handled and what to do with the whistleblowers. Then again, authorship and contributorship is important. This is something that is very often the case. And then again, journal has to have a clear policy on what they expect authors to satisfy, the requirements to satisfy for authorship and contributorship, as well as what are they going to do when there are some potential disputes. If an author wants to be added or taken off the author's byline in an article. Then again, the journal has to have, again, a clearly described process for any complaints and appeals, for example, for rejection of a manuscript and so on. Conflicts of interests and competing interests are very important. Again, there should be a clear definition as well as a process for handling conflicts of interest, not only of the authors, which gets published, but also of the reviewers. And especially from my point of view, especially from a point of view of academic editors that are also researchers, the conflicts of interest of editors are also very important and should be declared, and much more than it's currently the case. Then the journals also have to have policies. So this is something that needs to be available transparently and publicly on journals' websites so that everybody can see about the policies of the journal. Data availability. So are authors expected to share data or not? And again, they also should encourage the use of reporting guidelines, registration of clinical trials in order that the research can be reproducible and its validity also checked. Then they also have to have an ethical oversight where they have to check whether actually what is stated in the journal, in the submitted paper, has actually followed the ethical principles. So now this is part going into research ethics. And again, also about intellectual property. Very often, when you come to a journal, very often you don't know under which license or copyright the articles are published. Very often we have now Creative Commons licenses in open access, what it means. And from a point of view of a patient, sometimes it's very important that patients also, or participants in research also know what it means to be published in a journal article and what it means if it's published under a very open license. So that means that they can end up in Google pictures or something, and that they will stay forever, their pictures will stay forever, which is important from a point of view of protecting research participants. Also, there should be policies about what is considered as a pre-publication, is it a publication, what is considered as a published material. And again, this is something that Ksenija is going to talk about what is expected or what will be defined as plagiarism or redundant or overlapping publication. This should all be specified. Then again, journal management. So journals also have to be transparent about what they do, what kind of business model they do, what kind of policies, processes, softwares, and how they, what their fees for publications are, and again how they keep the professionalism of the editorial boards and editorial and publishing staff. Peer review process again has to be clear, transparently described and well managed. There should be training for editors and reviewers. We can question whether it's whether it works, and from what I know from works of many researchers that have studied peer review, it's very difficult to train peer reviewers. And then again, they have to have policies on how to ensure the integrity of the peer review, how, for example, how to handle conflicts of interest, appeals, disputes that may arise in peer review. And finally, journals should also allow discussions and corrections of the scientific dialogue after research has been published, whether it's through letters to the editor or actually some other moderated site. And you see here that PubPeer is put as an example. And what is also important, especially from the point of view of editors, we have to have mechanisms for ensuring the integrity of the published record. So if needed, it has to be corrected, revised, retract after they have published if they do not, if they are not valid. So this is what I wanted to say to kind of set up the stage for what we're going to discuss. And for all of you journal editors there, it would be interesting to see how your journal fares with these requirements to ensure the integrity of the publication. So that's much from me. I wanted to make it brief so that we have enough time to discuss.
Thank you, Professor Marušić, and thank you for your timeliness. Our next presenter is Professor Ksenija Baždarić, who is an assistant professor at the Department of Medical Informatics at the Faculty of Medicine of the University of Rijeka. Her academic background is in both social sciences and biomedicine. She's a research integrity editor at the Croatian Medical Journal and the editor and the chief editor of the European Science Editing. Her current research activities include the follow-up investigation of detection of plagiarism in scholarly journals. And as Professor Marušić already announced, her presentation will be on the text similarity and plagiarism detection in scholarly journals. Ksenija, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
So, as Mirta already said, my name is Ksenija Baždarić, and today I will speak about text similarity and plagiarism detection in scholarly journals. I work for Croatian Medical Journal for almost 10 years, and this is when I started investigating text similarity and plagiarism, and from 2016 I'm the chief editor of the East Journal, European Science Editing. So plagiarism is considered as major scientific misconduct, while text recycling, which was previously called self-plagiarism, is categorized into questionable research practices, and we could say a minor offense. So, by definition of Office of Research Integrity US, it is the appropriation of another person's ideas, processes, results, or words without giving appropriate credit to the source or author. And it can vary. Images can be plagiarized, data can be plagiarized, but what I'm going to speak today is textual plagiarism. So detection of plagiarism is mostly divided into 3 steps. First, we use text similarity software. Then we verify the report of the software, and then we make a conclusion whether an article, a manuscript is plagiarized or not. In an older document written by Liz Wager, and she was the chairman of the Committee of Publication Ethics. The document is How Should Editors Respond to Plagiarism. She proposed a model that could help editors to conclude whether a manuscript, an article, is plagiarized or not. So the questions to answer are: how much text is copied? This feature is extent. Whether a few words or several paragraphs or whole paper are copied from another source. Liz Wager proposed in that document that less than 100 words is considered minor plagiarism, while more than 100 words are to be considered major plagiarism. This model is still not universally accepted, but it is a proposal of a cutoff value that could help editors in order to decide. Then we have to check the originality of the copied material, whether the phrases that are copied are some usually phrases that are used, for example, in methods, or whether there are ideas in the discussion. And then the position of the material that is copied is also considered, whether the text was in the introduction, methods or results, or discussion. And finally, we check the referencing, whether the original text was cited or not. And altogether, with also some other features are considered in order to make a conclusion whether a manuscript is plagiarized or not. In checking the manuscripts with text similarity software, we often come to texts that were taken from previous work of authors, and which is now called text recycling or redundancy, and which was previously called self-plagiarism. And we also have to make decisions whether this reusage of, how to say, own text is legitimate reusage, or is it misrepresentation? Is it something unethical? So text similarity software can vary. There are hundreds on the internet that are free, non-commercial or commercial, so you have to buy subscription. There are text similarity software or text matching software made for academic purposes, but there is currently only one that is made for checking scholarly content, and that is the cross-ref similarity check with Authenticate algorithm, which was previously called cross-check. The logic of the text similarity software is pretty much the same. That is, you put text or document into the software, and with different algorithms that software have, it checks the manuscript you put into it with data, with some data text available on the internet, and with the databases which are available to that similarity software. For example, Crossref similarity check now checks 70 billion internet web pages and more than 60 million articles in also in journals protected by subscription. And as a result of that check, you get a similarity report that usually looks like this. So on the left, you have a manuscript that is checked, and on the right, you have the results. In the upper right corner, there is a number, which is overall similarity index, that can give an indication of the extent of text similarity. And what I have marked below is a filter, which when you open the filters. I'm sorry, the presentation is moving the. When you open the filters, then you can remove the quotes, and also you can remove the bibliography of the manuscript. And that way you can look the first at the extent and then at the parts of the manuscript. So prevalence of plagiarism was not extensively investigated in the literature. I have found only a few articles. Among them, there is also my investigation for my PhD thesis. And mostly they are from biomedicine. So in manuscripts submitted to journals, the prevalence of plagiarism was mostly between 11 and 23%. And those are results together for plagiarism and for text recycling. I can tell you that in Croatian Medical Journal, we had 8% of manuscripts that were plagiarized, and 3% of them were text recycled. What is more important, there are two articles in which the threshold for plagiarism was measured, and Higgins et al. And Taylor defined that the overall similarity index is between 12 and 15%, meaning that when you get a report in cross-ref similarity check in Identicate, and then a manuscript has an overall similarity index higher than, let's say, 15%, that is probably a manuscript you should additionally manually verify for plagiarism. So, this is case one, when you have text similarity from different sources. This is not some special case I will discuss, only the procedure. So first, when we have a manuscript like this, we check, as I said before, the extent, the overall similarity index, which is here very high, 56%. And probably without even looking, we could doubt the originality of this article, but still we look at each manuscript and manually verify, meaning that when we exclude references and quotes, we look whether the content was cited, where are the similarities, and how much. This is a case of patchwork plagiarism, meaning that the author took different portions of text from various sources. And this is probably the most common type of plagiarism that happens in journals. Case two is text recycling. So first of all, also like we look of the overall similarity index, which is 71%, and then we look whether the whose article was copied, and when we discover that it was from the same author, then we have to conclude whether this is something we allow or not. In this case, this was a case report, and in biomedicine, where the structure of a case report article is introduction, case report, meaning results, discussion, and conclusion. And in this particular manuscript, only the introduction was copied, not the case report, discussion, or conclusion. So the question can be whether this is acceptable or not. Sometimes editors allow similarity in the introduction section. Probably sometimes when the investigators are in the same field for many years. But for me, this similarity was too high, and it was almost the whole introduction that was copied. And I decided we will reject this manuscript. So in dealing with text recycling, you can help yourself as editor with the PubMed Central guidelines. So each time, as I was speaking about plagiarism, you also have to answer to yourself. So how much recycling you have? What is the text similarity rate you accept in recycling? Then where do you accept recycling? What is the position of the recycled text? If you allow it in methods, then you have to be sure that this is not duplicate publication, that the results are original. You have to check the previous publications of the same author and whether this is really original new data. It is sure not allowed to have similar text in the results, maybe some phrases, but not in the results and not in the discussion also. You also have to check whether the authors did reference their previous work and did make the clear explanation how is this work that they are submitting different from the previous. So there also are different articles. In medicine, in Croatian Medical Journal, they are mostly research articles, but in some other fields, articles are probably mostly non-research. But these guidelines state that the same rules should apply to the non-research articles also. So this is also maybe something we could discuss. Sometimes we have, if a lot of text is copied, we have copyright breach. It's meaning that are your own words yours if you have passed the copyright to a publisher. And sometimes we have cultural norms issues, meaning that authors coming from some countries have different understanding of plagiarism that than the editor has. So this is something new, and we have had a short discussion on our EASE creation group about it. And a few weeks after that, we have received a manuscript that was previously published on a preprint server. So we have now text similarity is very high, of course, because it is probably pretty much the same manuscript. And an editor has to decide whether this is a prior publication or not. Mostly in biomedicine, the journals allow manuscripts to be published on a preprint servers. Some journals, like for example Lancet, even have their own preprint servers for manuscripts. And so what is very important for journals is probably to understand that preprint is not a prior publication. And second, that in their instructions for authors, they have to make clear their prior publication policy. More and more journals are allowing preprints as something that is a normal practice. And finally, another thing that was also raised, the question whether manuscripts published from thesis, from dissertation or final thesis at the university are allowed. So there is also a COPE discussion document on best practices for issues around thesis publishing. So is dissertation, for example, a prior publication? If it is a traditional thesis, then it is allowed. And if it is a thesis that was published as chapters of published paper, then it is not allowed. And clearly it has to be referenced in the letter to the editor and in the referencing. And finally, I have to say that detection of plagiarism is editor's responsibility. They have to give clear instruction to authors about plagiarism detection and prior publication policies. And also editors have to educate themselves, peer reviewers and authors. And for some of us who are working at academic institutions, we can also always give additional education through courses. And this is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ksenija.
Something is blinking, so I was a little bit confused. I didn't know if I had more time, so I hope I'm in time.
You were almost right on time. Our next speaker is Vedran Katavić, who is an associate professor of human anatomy at the University of Zagreb Faculty of Medicine. His scientific background is in the fields of bone biology and immunology, very interesting these days. He is or has been a member and a president in various committees for ethics and integrity in research. And he was also a former research integrity editor at the Croatian Medical Journal. His today's presentation will be on publication integrity in the COVID era and on the research papers that have already been retracted from the public record. So Vedran, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I hope that you can hear me. I've browsed through everyone attending, and I'm saying hello to everyone who knows me and a special hello to everyone who doesn't. It seems that I'm the only one presenting cases. The idea was case discussion, so I thought, oh, I should present cases. And then my co-host decided to give you the important background. And Ksenija actually showed you how to deal with some of these things that happen in journals. I've had the fortune or the misfortune to have been on various positions in the process of defining and adjudicating guilt. I've been, as Ksenija is right now, the editor for Research Integrity in Croatian Medical Journal for a while, but I've also been member or head of various national and recently international bodies dealing with research integrity. So I've had ample opportunity of recognizing how things can go wrong and what to do when they do. First of all, I have to say that once I was reminded that I have taken on this this responsibility of co-hosting this panel, I was in the hospital. I fell off my bike, broke my collarbone, and had various other injuries. And Anna gently reminded me that I said yes to hosting or co-hosting this. So out of the blue, I said, sure, why not? I can do that. And I said, wouldn't it be interesting to see how many cases have happened already for retractions of research done in this pandemic. So there are several firsts, I would say, in the recent COVID-19 pandemic. There has rarely been a time where the general public has been more interested in evidence-based policy and evidence-based medicine, be it for their well-being or be it for public health policies. It really doesn't matter. Another first was the intense public scrutiny of everything that's been published, in any way published, be it a pre-print server, be it a journal, be it a website, be it a personal communication, Twitter, what have you, which led to a confusion of what it meant to be published, because some of the cases or some of the things that I'll show you also happen on preprint servers, which is very difficult to define once they're retracted from a preprint server as having been retracted. But anyway, this was a first that so many people, be it professional background or lay people, were very, very interested in scrutinizing everything that's been published and everything that anyone says about this pandemic. And finally, the third first is the incredible opportunity that the researchers, as well on one side, and then the publishers, their journals, and the editor journals have had this incredible opportunity of increasing their visibility, recognition, prestige, or citations, what have you. So in a host of firsts, my argument is that there's actually several premises that lead to my argument. One is that a fairly large number of research papers have already been published on COVID and the surrounding issues. Considering that this is a disease and a virus that's been around only since early February. And so it's been 7 months and we've had hundreds, if not thousands, of publications. Premise number two is that a notable number have already been retracted from the public record. Premise number three is, as I said earlier, that the overall level of scrutiny is high. And premise number four is, unfortunately, the public trust in the scientific method has reached a new low. So my argument or hypothesis is that at this point, publication ethics has a key role in maintaining public trust in the scientific endeavor. So not only is it important to maintain publication ethics as a way of maintaining a righteous way of publishing, but it has a deeper sense of what publication ethics has to do at this point, because every retraction after it's been, after the content of that retraction has been hashed and rehashed in the public, becomes a burden for scientists and civilization in general, I would say. So, as I said at the time, that was July, that was mid-July that Anna gently reminded me of my obligations. I said sure, and I came up with the idea that this would be a wonderful thing to show you the COVID stuff. And at the same time, as chance would have it, or as I'd like to say, great minds think alike. I'm obviously not the only one who's figured out that the number of retractions, as well as the number of publications concerning the COVID pandemic, have been on the increase. So while preparing this, I've used some of the sources, not to have to go to count these things all by myself. So I used Retraction Watch as a base where they keep most of the retractions and background stories for the cases that are ongoing, which is headed by Ivan and Marcus, so from the Retraction Watch, and they also published something of an opinion, a very, very short opinion. Is there an alarming and exceptionally high rate of COVID-19 retractions? And it was published just around the time that I was in the hospital, but I hadn't read it at the time when I chose this this topic. So a disclaimer, really, great minds think alike. So if Ivan ever gets to see this, or Marcus, I'm safe. And then later, sometime late in August, I found a fairly short book by Stuart Ritchie, a UK-based scientist, who in a oblique way mentioned COVID and stuff that happens with COVID in his book Science Fictions, and then I followed it up in an interview on Medium. It's called Elemental Medium, and finally published extremely recently concerning one of the possible cases that I'm going to show you at the very end, something from Minerva, a Norwegian journal, news outlet, also published online. I'm leaving these links so that if anyone needs to see those things, they're more than welcome to observe those things. Okay, so as I said, I use the Retraction Watch database to count or itemize the number of retractions that have already happened. And in this short time, there have already been 32 retractions of published papers, 3 papers that have been temporarily retracted, and at least 1 expression of concern. And this is all since February of this year. So I don't think that in recent history or in living memory, we've had so many retractions in one field if it wasn't the cases of anesthesiologists who had hundreds of publications retracted. But that was from single researchers or small groups of researchers. Well, this is from a host of researchers from various parts of the globe. Some of the contested research ideas that have grown out of these cases or have become cases of their own stem from doubts or on the origin of the virus, methods of its transmission, therapeutic approaches, overall mortality, and something also to think about, the effectiveness of masks in blocking this virus. So a lot of contested research ideas are presented, and those ideas were presented and published in notable journals, I would say. Several in Nature and Nature Medicine, multiple in The Lancet, some in New England Journal of Medicine, some in other journals, and as I've said earlier, some in preprint servers. So if we go deeper in some examples where this case studies are headed, if you think back to the Surgisphere studies led by Sapan S. Desai, and in a group that's really consisted of a science fiction author and people who really have nothing to do with the scientific endeavor. They have published two papers. One was in the New England Journal of Medicine, that was in June of 18, where they were discussing mortality in COVID, in the COVID pandemic. The next one was the same group retracted from The Lancet. So it appears that the hotter the topic, people go all in, and if they have fraudulent data, they say, well, let's choose a high-tier journal and let's publish our stuff there. And for reasons that some journal editors have to explain to their publishers and their readership, is how come these topics, while so hot, allow for the passage of such effectually drivel. Some other examples of impact is the French group headed by Didier Raoult, who discussed the effectiveness of the combination of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin as treatment. For some reason, I'm starting to read these things like Donald Trump, having difficulty with these basic terms. Which was not only retracted, but an interesting statement was issued where the International Society of Antimicrobial Chemotherapy, which is the owner of the journal where this was published, says that eventually this did not meet the society's expected standards, especially relating to the lack of better explanations of the inclusion criteria and the triage of patients to ensure patient safety. But it passed the original peer review and was published. So it's very, very painful when you have to retract these things, especially with such notices of definite concern, and not only for publication ethics, but also for ethics in general and how the patients were treated. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, a possible case. Recently, that was September 10, the Norwegian news outlet started reading very, very carefully the two papers that describe the initial outbreak of the virus in China. And just to give you some idea of how important this piece of work is, so it was published in February of 2020, early in February. Since then, it's reached almost 1 million article accesses. It's been cited roughly 2,000 times, well, whether in Web of Science or by Crossref. A lot of tweeters, 759 news outlets, 7 video uploaders, 70 blogs and stuff like that. And this publication managed to reach the 99th percentile of almost 300,000 articles of similar nature in Nature. So it has reached a significant impact. This one and a follow-up article also published in Nature, in the Nature group, but this is in Nature Medicine, published in May, which has so far garnered approximately 5 million article accesses and roughly 500 citations. But observe the number of tweeters, news outlets, which has exploded from the first case. And these are publications that define whether this virus is of natural origin or of possibly non-natural origins. And it's a developing story, and it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens with this case, if anything. I'm not saying that I doubt that the virus has a natural origin. I'm just saying that issues have been raised, and there are concerns that maybe the original publications are faulty in a way. So thank you for being patient with me. I'm finishing up, and this is my last slide with some final messages and final conclusions, hopefully. Let me start with a famous quotation that with great power comes great responsibility. And it seems that the journal editors are really in a position that defines the future of the scientific endeavor and the public trust in the scientific endeavor. On the other hand, we've also seen that in such a short time, the power of science to self-correct has been incredible. It's never been tested like this before, but the scrutiny of any topic has not been of this level. So it seems that the more scrutiny a topic receives, the greater the number of retractions that happen in that field. So question that remains is the general public aware of this, that it's a good thing that we are self-correcting, and that not everything published or spoken about is necessarily true, even if published in high-tier journals. Thank you.
Thank you, Vedran. And actually, thank you to all three speakers. At this point, I would like to open the floor for discussions, and we have been receiving some questions through the Q&A windows, so I will read some of them. There's a question from Jadranka Stonovski to Anna Marušić that you already answered, but maybe you would care to elaborate. The question is, do you think that publishing in closed access and not sharing your research data could also be considered as an ethical issue? And should we consider openness as a positive ethical behavior?
Yeah, thanks to Jadranka for this question. I completely agree, but then it would be also good that everything is in diamond open access, because then again, somebody has to pay for this. If we could find ways that this doesn't become as a burden to the author, and when you take into account small and scholarly journals, they are not commercial, they cannot afford to be open and transparent like big journals could. That's also one issue to keep in mind. But as you have seen, openness and transparency is mentioned in that checklist from COPE as an important requirement for journals to be open about what they do, how they do their job.
Thank you. And there is a question for Ksenia. It says, I didn't understand why PhD thesis is not a publication in some cases. I believe also that was also answered, but maybe you could just briefly elaborate on that.
Honestly, I wasn't involved in creating the COPE document, and my thoughts are that it is probably because theses are still not open to the public. Some of them are in closed repositories, and this is my first thought. And my second thought, they are for different audience. Usually thesis is read by several members of the committee, and mostly by family, and this is it. And my third point and Anna's point was that theses are not peer-reviewed in the same same way the articles are. So if Vedran, Anna, you would like to add something?
No, I would just like to say that, you know, PhD thesis very often in biomedicine, you already have to publish it. So it is a requirement to defend your PhD thesis, for example, at my university, is to have 2 publications. So it's already published. And the argument is, if I look at it from a point of view of journal editor, this hasn't been peer reviewed in a sense of journal peer review. With the external peer review, very often with the PhD, you have internal peer review. So for us, it would be like a pre-publication.
Again, I would just interject that it is peer reviewed, not in a strict sense of external peer review, but from a limited pool of peer reviewers, typically from that university, which leads to various questions of conflict of interest and stuff like that. But it is peer reviewed, and more and more universities around the world publish these PhD theses, and I often receive citation information that I have been cited in a PhD thesis. So they go through the process of investigating all the citations within a PhD thesis. So it's at least a pre-print.
I just remember that I'm actually more surprised by the fact that in social science and in humanities, you first defend your PhD thesis, and then this PhD thesis becomes a monography, and you publish the book. And this is counted as a book. So it is first counted as a PhD thesis, and then the same text becomes a book. This is what I'm concerned of. So you use the same text for two different reasons. In order to get promotion, it is counted twice.
Right, and that is actually done quite often.
Yes, this is really something that is normal, let's say.
Yeah, I actually had the same concern. I always wondered how ethical in a way that is. I'd like to move on. There is a few more questions and very few minutes left. There's a question for Anna. Should COPE make their auditing tool freely available? It is currently only for members.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was also wondering about that. I can ask COPE Council about that. But on the other hand, if you're a small journal, the yearly membership in COPE is not high. You know, big journals pay a bigger membership. So being a member is also beneficial there, that you get to get advice if you have a case, COPE adjudicates in cases. So it is something, but I know that PIPA has created some kind of a checklist for journals, which also includes publishing integrity aspects of it. So I think it's something that is available in different formats. I was just speaking from a point of view of COPE and how they organize their checklist.
Thank you. And a question for Vedran is, how do we deal with retractions that have obtained a high visibility in the social sphere? How do we counter fake news?
By being completely transparent and open about this. The peer review is not a perfect system, but it's as good as it gets, and that you'll always have trouble with published research occasionally, because we don't know what's behind the published story. So not only story, but the research. So I'm just answering, people asked what the speakers think of the table published in JAMA, correcting the medical literature, to err is human, to correct divine. I don't have a problem with correcting and making sure that everything is corrected. As long as we can somehow ascertain that there is no nefarious background to these publications. If you think back, some of these researchers actually from Harvard chose to be added to a huge byline of co-authors to one of the retracted papers about the hydroxychloroquine, about the non-effectiveness of the therapy that Donald Trump was touting. So what they said, oh, you know, let's publish something that will denigrate the president. So at the same time, they have not done their research. They were not even involved in investigating the background of the story. They haven't seen the data sets. So in that case, I'm not sure that saying, oh, let's correct this, because there is nothing to correct. It was completely created out of thin air. So I think that it's very important to say, you know, this was not just a mistake. This was something else at work. So while I'm perfectly fine with correcting things that are done in honest error, even in a scientific blunder, no problem, correct it. But if it's done for purposes that go beyond just enhancing our understanding of the world as we see it, then I don't think there is an upside to just correcting it.
And if I can say, we usually like to look at science as that it's outside of being human. So scientists are humans, and science is a humanistic activity. So we see all kinds of biases. And in the case of Lancet and New England Journal of Medicine retractions, it was a typical example of confirmatory bias. Both the editors and reviewers saw what they wanted to see in these articles. And that's why it got published, although it was really based on no evidence, and that's one of big problems that are the human aspect of science.
Well, I absolutely agree that a mistake, especially an honest mistake, is something completely different than intentionally deceiving the audience. So there's no surprise there. Anyway, at this point, I would like to thank all the speakers and especially all the audience for listening, for watching, and posing all the questions. There are some that we haven't had the time to answer. You have the speakers' emails. I'm sure they will be happy to answer all of your questions if you've posed them directly to them. Again, thank you so much for participating in this panel. I would like to remind you that following this session will be a block of videos from our sponsors, to whom we're very grateful. And another note is that we will have a break until 2 p.m. And at 2 p.m., please tune back in. We'll have our second keynote speaker, Ariana Becerril Garcia, who will be presenting her her speech, and enjoy your break. See you back here at 2 p.m. Goodbye to everyone.
Hvala Mirta. Hvala.
Bye.
Yes, let me off.
Let's dive into the top 5 common challenges some typical users and how they Next, there are the core users. These are typically students who have been in school for more than 1 year. They have a specific area or major of study. Finally, there are the advanced users. These are graduate students or students who are returning for professional development reasons. The good news? EBSCO Discovery Service offers features and functionality that can match the expectation of your library's end users, no matter their level. EBSCO Discovery Service takes research to the next level through a perfect combination of content and technology, and by taking into account all of the critical elements of the research process. EBSCO Discovery Service challenges the expectations of how a discovery solution can and should address the needs of its users, whether it's a simple search by a first-year university researcher, a subject-specific search by an intermediate researcher, or a sophisticated search by a postgraduate researcher.
In discovery services with billions of records, precision is critical for the kind of search that I like to do.
And I like to do.
And me too. See, here's the thing. Your library caters to a variety of users at different research levels and with different search intents. Making sure your search technology can match their expectation is critical, not just for us connecting with the right information, but for your library, its usage, and its value. Easier said than done, right? That's why you need to find a discovery service that gives options for users to tailor their search for their research intent, leveraging high-quality subject indexes for nearly any area of study, and users' natural language to add precision in a search. Mapping synonyms on the back end allows a user to search on one word, but also receive results that include different words which share the meaning. This is called enhanced subject precision.
Search success.
Right. But what if we took that search success one step further by mapping the natural language of the user? So no matter what words a user searches, the discovery platform will retrieve all content that includes the user's natural term and its equivalent subject, saving the user's time and frustration with subject searches.
How does this help me?
A discovery service that leverages enhanced subject precision along with a semantic data structure, like a knowledge graph, expands a library user's search and delivers the most relevant results anytime they search. Can you explain this in natural language for me? Sure. Say you enter the search phrase vitamin C. An evolved discovery system will retrieve relevant results on that string of letters or keyword. But it is also smart enough to deliver results on ascorbic acid.
So this discovery service is helping me learn while I search to learn?
Exactly.
This is going to up my research game.
For sure. And this type of search technology is found in EBSCO Discovery Service. Want to learn more about our evolving search technology? Visit ebsco.com or call us to learn more.
This is a keel.
Start course for beginners and beyond.
This is the keel's doctor, doing his best to break the news gently.
This for free here on YouTube. And if you're serious about learning Dart, you should consider buying my full course on Udemy.
This is the goldfish that changed the keel's life. Because this is Ilsa, and Ilsa's having a eureka moment.
You can buy the full course for a discounted price by typing this URL in your browser. That said, enjoy my course.
This is how a moment of inspiration becomes an idea.
In this course, you will learn everything you need to know to get started programming with Dart.
With a little help from Caravane Analytics. It starts with Web of Science. But Ilsa and researchers like her can access millions of research papers, track ideas, and check, helping her idea develop, grow, and spread across the research community.
I highly recommend that you work with me.
This is Ivy, head of R&D. She's intrigued by Ilsa's idea. It could become a possible treatment. Insights from Cortellis confirm the idea is sound and has a market, turning the idea into an innovation. A drug, to be exact, which needs to be protected. So the lawyer uses Dell to conduct global patent research and secures a patent. Enter CompuBot and Monitor is to research a name, trademark, and domain, turning the drug into a plan that will treat patients around the world. And this is a key. The guy whose life it has changed. This is Clarivate Analytics, accelerating innovation through the power of human ingenuity. And just this once, the power of a goldfish.
After each exercise, I'll show you the solution, but I encourage you to try and solve it by yourself first, and then compare your solution with mine. That way, you'll be able to see what could be improved in your solution, or maybe just see a different way of doing things. This course also comes with an official GitHub repository, which you can find at this URL. This contains a complete syllabus so that you can more easily see how the course is structured.
Design thinking and innovation at Apple.
Understand how we've earned that distinction. You must understand what a true citation index is and how we construct it. Our editorial team is committed to selection policies which ensure including only the best content. Our exacting standards build quality into our solution, quality that is vital to supporting your personal research success. In the 1960s, Dr. Eugene Garfield envisioned how an index of research citations would form a web of science. The Web of Science Core Collection is the world's most respected source of interconnected research information. To understand how we've earned that distinction, you must understand what a true citation index is and how we construct it. Our editorial team is committed to selection policies which ensure including only the best content. Our exacting standards build quality into our solution, quality that is vital to supporting your personal research success. In the 1960s, Dr. Eugene Garfield envisioned how an index of research citations would form a web of science, or even more, a web of scientists and scholars in the social sciences and arts and humanities. A global network of the world's best research, woven across disciplines, between nations, languages, and terminology, and even spanning time. This web of literature could be carefully curated, capturing the most respected ideas and innovations reported in the research world. Nodes on the web were formed around people and their published ideas. The threads forming connections and navigation routes through this web of scientists were citations, intellectual attributions linking new discoveries with earlier concepts, allowing researchers to blaze new trails from the pioneers and giants of research to new horizons. The explosive growth of the internet and the evolution of electronic information have propelled the Web of Science Citation Index into a position of leadership, a mission-critical desktop resource used around the world by over 7,000 institutions, containing more than 1 billion citations in over 250 disciplines, linking back to the origins of published research. When competing resources joined the conversation, our commitment to Dr. Garfield's vision for constructing the Web of Science Citation Index remained true and unwavering. Select only the best quality content in each discipline to identify the nodes of people and publications, and thoroughly index and extract the citations and important data from every item in every selected source to establish the pathways and links between them. Let's look more closely at the extensive team of people and processes that build the Web of Science. Our editorial team has always prioritized quality, not quantity. Just like librarians, they capture only the most exceptional sources for all disciplines of research, curating an industry-leading collection of the most critical